Now this news is a few days old now, but for those of you who are not aware, CZ Firearms now owns a 100% stake in Colt Firearms. This news is exciting and sad. It's exciting because CZ has a long history of producing great firearms, ones that people actually want to buy and carry. It's sad because Colt, perhaps one of the most recognizable names in firearms, one of the most iconic American brands, has been acquired by a foreign company. And there are very few large firearm manufacturers left in the US that are not partly or wholly owned by foreign enterprises now, which is par for the course for most of our manufacturing in this country. Again, kind of sad, really, in the big scheme of things. Now, CZ has a great opportunity to revive a brand that many of us love. Now, why do I have two Sig Sauer pistols on this table when I'm talking about Colt? And that's because I presently don't own a single Colt product. Why is that? Well, like many mass consumers of firearms, I don't own a Colt because they haven't done anything innovative in decades. This is something I talked about a bit in a video I did several years ago when Colt was beginning to put out limited edition runs of certain firearms. We were all rather frustrated here on GunTube that Colt was not putting out beautiful wheel guns and resurrecting all of the snake guns and things, and eventually they did. But they completely missed the mark on ARs and other more popular firearms. No one was buying Colt AR-15s anymore. Those were the gold standard for a very, very long time. The AR market today is, of course, incredibly crowded, incredibly competitive. And when you are so reliant on government contracts that you ignore the consumer market, you tend to find yourself in a pretty rough spot, especially when Colt didn't get picked up for military contracts and FN did. They were in a very rough spot. Now, they didn't bother to do anything innovative like perhaps develop new handguards or rail systems. Nothing. They were essentially selling the same AR-15s they were from 30 years ago at the same prices they were 30 years ago, which is why no one was really buying them, especially in a world of a $350 AR-15 from Palmetto. I mean, sure, it's not going to be as robust, perhaps, as some of the older Colts, but the newer Colts were using so many components that appeared to be farmed out from other companies, you weren't really buying a pony rifle anyway, which was a major point of contention several years ago for many of us when they began putting out this limited run of Vietnam-era style semi-auto M16 clones, where they kept saying, well, the price is high because we had to retool so many of our machines to make these retro parts, and then they essentially admitted that almost none of the components on the gun were actually made in-house by Colt. While we were sitting there screaming, just make good revolvers for the love of God. Now, one of the other things that really killed Colt through the years was the fact that they never bothered to keep up with what the consumer market wanted as far as defensive handguns. Now, I've carried Glocks, I've carried Smith & Wessons, and I usually carry SIGs for self-defense. The P320 you see in front of you, I carry probably about 90% plus of the time, and then if I'm out jogging or doing some exercise or something, I'll carry the little P290 on the belly band that you see there. Colt never put out a striker-fired gun. They never put out some quality double-stack pistols. They never tried to really capture the law enforcement or military market, even foreign contracts, by bringing on board some people who knew what they were doing. They kept relying on some of their older designs and didn't innovate with any of those older designs. And they have some really great old school designs that we would have loved to have seen brought back in a good way. I'll give you an example. The Remington R51, which was a massive failure, I would have loved to have seen Colt bring back the 1903 semi-auto pistols. Those would have been great. In a modern version, perhaps double stack. Now that we see the P365 with its double stack magazine, a 15-round magazine, and a pocket gun, that's pretty impressive. And there's no reason Colt couldn't have done that same type of design or innovated in that same capacity. They had the means, they had the engineers, they had the capability, and failed to do it, which is why they had to keep declaring bankruptcy over and over again. After that first major bankruptcy, I expected to see something innovative come out. And then the second time, nothing. And finally they start putting out the snake guns again. Thank goodness. Those were doing pretty well for them. But they still had not carved out big enough of a niche in the carry market. They still had not carved out the law enforcement market or the military market. Again, they failed to innovate. So now for the good news. CZ innovates. They're not afraid to use polymer. They're not afraid to make double stack pistols. So I'm very excited to see what direction they may take some of these old designs in, or new designs under the Colt brand. Now CZ does own a number of companies, and CZ is very cool in that they don't have to slap CZ on something when they buy a new brand. So going forward, I expect to see a lot of really exciting products put out by Colt. I hope to see some innovation in the AR-15 market, the AR-10 market. I hope to see some really cool innovation on their revolvers. I hope to see a real modern semi-auto Colt pistol. I would love that. And if it's done under the watchful eye and the engineers from CZ, I will be one of the first ones in line to buy that pistol. So congratulations to ZZ on your acquisition of Colt. We hope that you are as passionate about this brand as a lot of us out here in the gun world are. We hope you will treat it well, and we have little doubt that you won't provide us with an outstanding product, one that Colt hasn't been able to make in several decades.